On a cold Parisian night, the Marquis de Montfort's carriage raced like an arrow through the wide streets, carelessly racing against the wind. Its huge wheels clattered over the cobblestones, stirring up dust, and pushing the poor aside as if they were mere obstacles unworthy of attention. As the carriage entered a poor neighborhood, little Louise was playing in front of her house, jumping up and laughing, trying to catch a small butterfly. She didn't see the approaching carriage, and the driver didn't bother to warn her. The Marquis encouraged her to go on as if in a race, oblivious to anything but the exhilaration of his frantic speed. A scream tore through the air, clouds of dust rose, Louise's small body fell beneath the horse's hooves, and the carriage passed over them without stopping. The Marquis didn't move in his seat or order the driver to stop. He simply turned his head for a moment, then said coldly, "Are the horses hurt?" People stood in shock, crowding around the lifeless child as her father, Jean, pushed between them, trembling. Jean knelt beside his daughter, cradling her in trembling arms, and looked at the Marquis with eyes brimming with tears and anger. The Marquis did not get out of his carriage, but merely gave him a haughty look, then signaled his driver to proceed as if nothing had happened. But at that moment, an inextinguishable fire was born in the grieving father's heart. In the days that followed, Jean did not rest. He found no solace in the words of his neighbors, nor did he care about promises of justice that would not reach a noble Marquis. He knew that the law would not do him justice, so he decided to take matters into his own hands. He began to observe the Marquis, studying his habits, his outings, and his walks through the city. When the right moment came, he hid in one of the narrow alleys. Jean was carrying a dagger, not particularly sharp, but enough to leave a mark. As the carriage approached, Jean emerged from the shadows and stood in the middle of the road with his hands raised. The driver shouted and stopped the horses at the last moment. The Marquis stormed out angrily, "You fool! How dare you stand in my way?" But before he could say another word, Jean lunged at him, grabbed the Marquis by the collar, and pulled him out of the carriage with a violence no one had expected. The Marquis tried to resist, but Jean was stronger. He plunged his dagger into his shoulder, not to kill him, but to leave lasting pain. "This is for Louise," Jean whispered, looking into the Marquis's eyes, which were filled with fear for the first time in his life. Jean let him collapse to the ground, then disappeared into the crowd, leaving behind a wounded nobleman and an eternal reminder that his vanity would not protect him from the justice of the poor. The next day, the story spread through the neighborhoods of Paris, and Jean's name was mentioned in whispers in the alleys, as a symbol of a simple man who regained his dignity and took his daughter's rights in a world that did not recognize the rights of people like him.